The continued lack of marketing for Shadows continues, or so we thought. We just got some brand new gameplay for Shadows, as well as information regarding the stealth side of the game. So as you may know, Ubisoft planned to make those developer diary episodes. I covered episode 1 and the leaked episode 2 on my channel, but I'm pretty sure they've now abandoned that series entirely for God knows what reason. Maybe everything that was shown in those developer diaries was from before the delay, I have no idea. But it's not all doom and gloom, because they are now releasing this. Now this is a roadmap of articles on the game, and today, as of me making this video, they released the first article which goes over stealth. Now in this article, they showed us some new gameplay and interesting game-changing information if I'm being honest. So that's exactly what we're gonna go over in this video. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button if you have not. The goal is of course 100,000 subscribers and we are getting closer every day. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So this article that just got released today as of me making this video focuses on our shinobi Naoe, with some slight information dumps on Yasuke too, surprisingly. So the article starts off with them referring to stealth as a new stealth philosophy. The first thing mentioned is them talking about a big departure, and that's the removal of the Eagle Companion. You know, something we've seen in Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla and Mirage. So that is a pretty noticeable removal to implement. Now what they've replaced it with is a shift to tactical movement to movement decision making, relying on your character's senses. Now this shift places a much heavier emphasis on your awareness, so it's up to you if you miss something. Now what are those decision making gameplay features? Well, one of them is a brand new thing called Observe, and the other one being something that we know, which is classic Eagle Vision. Let's start off with Observe. Now Simon LeMay, the associate game director, describes it as, the new Observe mechanic is at the core of the Assassin's Creed Shadows experience. When in doubt, take a pause, observe the world around you, and only then should you decide what your next move should be. Now what's interesting with this Observe mechanic is it helps you tag enemies, locate loot, and even identify quest objectives from high vantage points. Now can I just say, this gameplay footage they've released for this looks pretty nice. I like how they put a straw hat on Naoe, just to show a little tease of customization. Of course, without showing off leaks that were floating around recently, there is a lot of customization with many different outfits. Now some things I noticed from this footage of course is we can see the level of enemies, which in this case is 28, as well as I assume a big brute enemy who seems to be a much higher level. Now I'll go over what we can and cannot do against these high level enemies later in the video. Now when it comes to our traditional Eagle Vision, it's more of the classic things we know, so that's revealing enemies through walls and highlighting important sound cues. Of course in this footage the enemies are in red and the servants are highlighted in orange. Now next up in the article is all about Naoe and her shinobi moves. So as you should know by now, Shadows will let you hide in the shadows, quite literally, and make you invisible to enemies. We've seen this shown to us in a different gameplay video. They also mention once again the whole lantern situation where you're able to destroy them with shurikens to give Naoe cover in the darkness. Also, can I just say again, why does this gameplay footage look so high quality? You know, I think it's because it's not rendered like 10 bloody times over each other, just like the Ubisoft forward footage was. Now in this clip, we're seeing Naoe crouch walk past a bunch of doors, and this is actually part of the new system with sound cues. So no joke, depending on how loud or quiet you are, it can alert guards nearby who can spot you. The article describes it as standing up increases your visibility and crouching will make Naoe's footsteps sounds considerably reduced. So back then in feudal Japan, there were types of floors named nightingale floors, which upon walking on would make a chirping sound. And these types of floors were used throughout many temples and palaces. So it seems like they've literally implemented it here. Just listen for yourself to the footsteps of Naoe.
Forces will join up there.
We also got some more footage on being prone, but now it appears we're able to do some sort of roll on the floor. So according to this article, if you press the dodge button when prone, you're now able to roll to the side, front or even back. Now I already know this will be quite helpful for stealth, especially when you're crawling and a guard is approaching. You can just very quickly roll back into a bush or even underwater, because believe it or not, you can be prone underwater. Now what's even more interesting is Yasuke can do this too. Yes, Yasuke can go prone and crawl on the floor. I'm not sure why the developers did not decide to show this off in the article, but hey, at least now we know that. Now the next part of the article goes over Naoe's tools a lot more in depth. Before we had to guess what they would do, but now they fully explained each tool. So the first one is the smoke bomb, a pretty classic tool we're all familiar with that creates a cloud of smoke, allowing you to escape or assassinate low-ranking enemies without being seen. Now something that is new in relation to smoke bombs is that certain enemies such as samurai cannot be assassinated whilst they are caught in the smoke bomb. Now I don't know how you guys will feel about that. I mean, in terms of realism and immersion, sure, but you know, at the same time, I would prefer to be able to assassinate all my enemies with one swift strike. Now, if this feature does not appeal to you, they did mention that you can turn on insta-kills in the game's menu. I don't think I will do that, as I'd rather play the game as it was intended. Now, just going back to these samurai enemies. So when they are in the smoke, they will very quickly move out of the smoky area, and apart from not getting assassinated from behind, the samurai can also slice bushes to search for you, as well as being more hyper aware to deny assassinations. The associate game director describes it as, samurai are fearsome enemies and cannot be taken lightly. Once alerted, they are hard to trick or lure, as they assume that any tricks you use are just that, a trick to lure them. This will force you to adapt and think harder about how to get the drop on them. Now, I don't really like how they showed gameplay just for smoke bombs in this article. It would have been nice to see all the tools in use again. Now, the second tool is the shinobi bells, which is a tool used to distract enemies by throwing a bell on the floor to lure guards away from their post to create opportunities. The third tool is the kunai, an extremely sharp throwing knife that can deal a lot of damage and also result in one-shot kills when aimed with precision. Of course, precision I assume means where you're aiming, so maybe aim for the head. And the last tool is the shuriken, which are star-shaped throwing knives that can momentarily stun enemies and are also useful to be used as distractions in the environment. The article then moves on to talk more on Naoe and stealth, and interestingly, they describe Naoe as the smallest assassin to date, which surprised me. I genuinely thought that the Chinese assassin Xiao Zhen would have been the smallest, but I guess I was wrong here. I like how in this article they mention how Naoe can hide inside small storage spaces and boxes in order to get the drop on enemies. Sadly, they don't really show gameplay for that part, but I can only imagine how innovative something like that could look. We then get confirmation that the double assassinations are returning, which thank God. Now, this was speculation before, and thankfully it's now confirmed, because double assassinations is something you just don't want to remove from your game, as that would just be goddamn idiotic if they did. So by equipping the Tanto blade as one of Naoe's main weapons and also unlocking a dedicated skill, this will allow you to perform double assassinations, both from behind and also from mid-air. Now, this is a part of the article that excites me a lot, and I'm glad this feature exists, and that is grabbing. So now, when undetected, you can now manually grab and drag enemies in any direction, allowing you to either silently assassinate them or decide to do a non-lethal takedown. Now, I am all for this, because this grab mechanic that they've introduced simply reduces the automation that we've seen in previous games. You know, all we could do in the other games is simply assassinate or knock out our enemies, but we've never seen something as complex as, you know, dragging your literal enemy away from this spot into a bush or wherever. The game director explains it as, in Shadows, if you want to assassinate someone from a stalking bush, you have to manually grab them, pull them in, and only then can you dispatch them. So yeah, that's some pretty good news right there. Now, the next part of the article goes over the enemies and what they can do, and this part starts off by going over the introduction of servants as a non-lethal enemy type, which has a lot to stealth. Now, while these servants don't really engage in combat at all, their ability to alert guards can completely derail a carefully planned infiltration. Now, I love the idea of having to monitor servants as they patrol their own routes. Keeping track of them makes stealth feel more rewarding, especially if you fully complete an outpost or wherever it is undetected. Also, the fact that they stand out in eagle vision in orange is a great touch, making it way more easier to identify them, so you know you don't get confused with regular NPCs or enemies. Another thing they mentioned has to do with the stealth AI, and how they describe it as more forgiving. If you remember in Valhalla, the enemy AI when trying to do stealth in a fortress or an outpost was complete ass. I remember in Valhalla you could get detected for the littlest of things, which meant the entire area was alert. Now in Shadows, it seems to be the opposite. So in temples or fortresses or castles or wherever, different districts will exist as their own individual arenas. So what that means is, let's say you are caught while performing stealth. Instead of, you know, a game like Valhalla where the entire area will go after you, only that certain district or area you got caught in will look for you. Now I like this, as it allows for recovery and re-engagement even if you're caught, which makes the stealth feel a lot more forgiving without really completely removing the stakes. They also mentioned that if you get detected by an enemy, they will search for you in pairs, with one watcher and one seeker, and there will also be more alert from then on. So, you know, features like whistling to lure them will only result in their suspicions being increased. Now, remember earlier where I mentioned how double assassinations are confirmed? Well, there is a progression system that if you neglect, it will cause your assassinations to not be one shot. So there's going to be a hidden blade upgrade system, which I guess isn't really anything new considering we have the spear leveling system in Odyssey, which was also an Assassin's Creed game made by Ubisoft Quebec. So I assume it's going to work in a similar approach. But of course, since this is an RPG game, it's expected for a thing like hidden blade upgrading to be a feature. So the way you can detect if an assassination is successful is by looking at the color of the prompts. So a white assassination prompt means you can instantly kill that enemy, a yellow one means it's not instant, but you will deal damage to them, and the red one means that enemies cannot be affected to it at all and will deny you. In fact, the associate game director explains it quite well. He says, when it comes to assassinations, progress and context work in hand, invest in perks that increase your assassination damage and testings around. A strong enemy may survive a frontal assassination, but may die from a sneaky air assassination. Now let's go over the final part of the article. There's some information about Yasuke and stealth, which surprised me that they'd even talk about this. So Yasuke, as we know, is the brute protagonist. You know, the one that will do all the heavy lifting and the raw combat. However, he can still be stealthy when he uses his bow. So yeah, that's interesting to have. I mean, it would have been quite silly if there was no stealth aspect for Yasuke at all. Now also what's interesting is Yasuke is now able to assassinate enemies as well, but not in the way you're thinking. He cannot go behind and use a hidden blade like Naoe, but instead he can sneak behind enemies and use his melee weapon as his assassination tool, which just sounds so pretty goddamn brutal. I mean, imagine that, minding your business, and next thing you know, a big ass kanabo strikes your head from above. I mean, ouch. Now the article ends with some hopeful news. They mentioned that there will be more on Yasuke in the next article, which of course is going to be all about combat, so that is going to be self-explanatory. And that is pretty much it for the article. What are your guys' thoughts on it? I'll be honest, everything I said is pretty positive, and even the gameplay footage that they've shown, it does not look janky or not appealing. The graphics do genuinely look impressive. In fact, this game right here is what Unity is to Rogue, but in this generation. The new engine, the new systems, and a lot more. I'll be sure to cover the next article when that's released, which is all about combat. Anyway, if you did enjoy this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And with that said, I will see you in the next one.